One breath, I could say all fruits and vegetables are good. But in another breath, I could say there are certain ones that have an above average ability to help with certain concerns, right? Blueberries are very unique. They have a very large amount of anthocyanins. Anthocyanins are not found in a banana, but then a green banana has a large amount of resistant starch, and that's valuable in its own right.
Today, we're diving into the important topic of fatty liver disease, a condition that affects nearly a third of the world's population and where nutrition plays a critical role in management and prevention. And to help us break it all down, I'm thrilled to introduce Andy Santis. Andy is a registered dietitian in private practice, a social media enthusiast, and a multi-time published author based in Toronto, Canada. Let's get into our discussion for today.
All right. Hello, Andy, and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. So nice to be here.
So good to chat with you. It's been a little while since our last chat, but I was looking forward to this chat today. I know you're an expert in fatty liver, so we'll get into it. I guess just to start off, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, where you work, and your specialization in private practice?
Yeah. I've been a dietitian for like 10 years now. And wrote a bunch of books along the way. I've been involved in social media along the way, and I've always strived to balance like working with people privately and then also sharing information more broadly, because I find both equally rewarding and valuable in their own way. So that's generally what I do. Instagram and TikTok, and then my writing, and of course private work. Last few years, I focused more on fatty liver in my practice, and I mean the simple answer for that, which you'll appreciate, and we'll see how many other people appreciate, is like pretty much, we all cultivate our own philosophy around nutrition. And I found that mine was quite suitable for resolving fatty liver. And it gave me a great context to help people outside of just saying, oh, hey, this is what you should do for general health, or this is what you should do to lose weight. Because I'm not super compelled by either of those avenues. But fatty liver is very prevalent. It's very concerning for people. And so it's just a perfect fit from that perspective.
Yeah, definitely. And as we'll get into, it ties into gut health, which I love to talk about as well. Before we get into that, just how many books have you published now to this point?
11. And then most of them are co-published, to be fair, like with recipe developers, because I'm not very good at recipe development. I usually just do the writing stuff. But 11 total. And my last one, which was on fatty liver, which I started working on in 2021, came out in 2022. Like that's the one that kind of changed a lot for me.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
No.
I had a copy of that when I gave it to the family member, but I have 5 of your books here.
Yeah, sweet. Yeah, don't worry. I don't have a copy of my own fatty liver book. That one was relatively popular. I guess people took that one up. But and you know how it is. The funny thing is that in my level of understanding, it's like it's incomparable to that time, right? I wouldn't even want to read. The book is obviously valuable, but I wouldn't even want to read it now because my comprehension of the topic is just vastly superior, as is the case with us. When we're constantly learning and doing professional development in these areas.
Yeah, that's very true. Yes. So let's get into it. Actually, I am curious though. I just want to ask you, because probably people listening know you from online and social media, but what got you interested in becoming a dietitian? Why did you go into dietetics?
Back in the day, I wasn't the healthiest kid, as a teenager, basically. That's all it is. And I kind of realized I need to change certain things. And that for me involved playing soccer and then paying attention to nutrition. But the problem is that finding out how to eat optimally can be a very convoluted path and very complicated for someone who doesn't know anything. So I kind of realized like, A, well, this changed my life, but B, this was way too hard to do. So let me change other people's lives and make it easier. And that's as simple as that. That's what sent me down this path. So very cliche, but nonetheless.
And do you really like kale? For anyone who's watching
I do love kale.
Of this, we can see a beautiful. Is that real kale or is it I can't tell if it's like
No, it's a print. It's like it's one of 100 prints by a Toronto artist, Erin Rothstein. And she does amazing work for anyone who's into art and supporting local people. So
you just do fruits and vegetables or like different?
You know what? No, I think she does all sorts of different stuff and it's all really cool. I haven't actually checked her page for a while, but she does like sneakers, like different, like I can't even remember. It's just so much cool stuff, but yes, lots of fruits and vegetables too. So,
okay. We'll have to check that out. And then, let's get into the liver. So just to set up this topic today, why don't you explain what the liver is and what it does for us? What's its role in the human body?
Yeah, I mean, so the liver, I guess it's kind of cliche at this point, but you hear a lot, it performs over 500 functions in the body, but it plays a role. It stores vitamins, plays a role in fat metabolism and carbohydrate metabolism and iron metabolism. But the most famous thing that people really like to talk about is the detoxifying function. And I think that'll come out in today's conversation because that functionality is also tied in with why the liver is so valuable, but also into what goes wrong and potentially can go wrong in fatty liver in terms of the cells responsible for that. But a lot of the blood in the body flows through the liver after the digestive system, and it has a very important role to clean it out and do various other functions from there. So that's the most fun part of it. But beyond that, it's hundreds of other things. So it's a lot.
Yeah, so it's known as like our body's major detoxifier. Also in the context of like sports, running, nutrition, along with our muscles, it stores glycogen or energy. So it has that storage of carbon.
Stores vitamin D as well. So that's kind of a fun fact.
In the context of digestion, I guess, too, it produces bile acids, which help with breakdown of fats and storage, like fat soluble nutrients. So the liver is very important, key to keeping it healthy. Yeah, what happens when maybe the liver is not doing so well or it's not healthy? What does that look like and what conditions can that turn into?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. And that's probably one of the questions that is hardest to answer in a sense, because it's kind of like you're asking, okay, if you take someone with like low grade fatty liver, how is that going to manifest per se in their daily life? It's not necessarily clear, right? It's not very clear where, okay, as fatty liver goes up, you get these manifestations in daily life, but there's a lot there. So, so first of all, the most common, in a way, it's unfortunate, but the most common symptom of fatty liver, if there's any at all, is fatigue, which is obviously very general, which can happen for a variety of reasons. But it's more so that like the most likely thing to go wrong with the human liver. So if you have an individual and like the context is, hey, I want to protect my liver health. Well, statistically and logically speaking, what you're really saying is that you want to protect yourself against fatty liver disease or resolve it if you have it, because it is the most likely thing that's going to go wrong, right? Now, if left unresolved, or if you get a fatty liver diagnosis and you do nothing about it, well, then you open yourself up to a lot of future concerns. So for example, I just saw a study literally published this month that fatty liver disease is now the #1 cause of liver cancer in Sweden specifically. Wow. Okay. So fatty liver does increase the risk of various types of cancers if left unresolved. Now, part of that is because the choices that get you to fatty liver, if not rectified, will cause more issues. Obviously that's a big part of it. But when liver fat accumulates, and we'll talk about this more, but liver fat accumulates, inflammation follows, and then you can get, NASH, which is just characterized by fibrosis and scarring in the liver. So that's the most obvious thing that can happen to a fraction of people who have fatty liver. But yeah, those are just some initial thoughts.
Yeah. And I guess, how do we define fatty liver? And I know the term has changed. I think it was a year or 2 years ago. It was non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Now it's MAFLD, another confusing acronym. I saw in some sources MASLD, depending on what you're looking at. But yeah. I
guess the scientific community decided that they would change the potentially like stigmatizing term, which is like fatty liver, to an extremely convoluted scientific term, which surely the majority of people can't even say, which is like metabolic associated steatotic liver disease, right? And like steatosis is probably, it means fat accumulation. I don't know if it's Latin or whatever the case may be, but I don't know. Like for me, fatty. Yeah, right. So scientific, fair enough. But for me, it's an interesting choice. It kind of just seems like some smart people in a room just decided for everyone, and it makes sense. And like it is, the wording makes sense, but it's like it's not going to be super comprehensible. So that's why I don't use it broadly, just as of yet. But you're definitely right about that. And then what the question was in regards to how do we define, diagnose it, and so on.
Yeah.
It's an interesting one also because this depends a lot on what imaging and test one has available, right? So the technical definition is that 5% or more of the liver is represented by fat accumulation, which it's important for people to know. The human liver weighs, let's say, I'm going to round down 3 pounds. So 5% of that is 0.15 pounds, right? That's the same amount of fat in a cup of nuts. So it's not like a mound of fat, right? It's a small amount of fat that could cause a mound of issues, for a little bit of wordplay. Now, how do you know if you have a fatty liver? Well, you can get less precise tests like an ultrasound, which will show liver fat, but cannot really quantify it meaningfully. or you can get something more precise, like a FibroScan, which can quantify it very precisely, right? Very few people even get a FibroScan, never mind a biopsy, which is technically like the gold standard. But for practical purposes, a third of the population has a fatty liver. That's not really a functional way to diagnose it. In the absence of both of those things, you can use predictive calculations. Like if you have low HDL, high triglycerides, and high ApoB, there's a 50% chance you have fatty liver, and there's a very high chance in the next 5 years you will get it if you don't already. So there's also predictive things that we can look at too. I'll say one more thing to that point is like liver enzymes, people put a lot of value in them, but they're not that valuable per se. And the reason is that you can have an individual who has liver fat accumulation and normal liver enzymes, and you can have an individual who has high liver enzymes, but has essentially reversed fatty liver disease. So they're really not the best indicator. And and GGT of all the liver enzymes is the most predictive of them all, for whatever that might be worth, people listening.
Fatty liver, okay. Why do you think, I guess maybe just speaking in like Canada specifically, but why aren't people doing fibro scans? Is it just because fatty liver is so common now, or we just don't have the resources to get people tested, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think people are getting fibro scans. I think there's not that many machines. I think there's a technological limitation. I think that's one thing. I think fatty liver is increasingly of interest, right? It's kind of on the scene in a sense in the last 10 or 20 years. So I've seen an estimate that 4 in 10 adults will have fatty liver by 2050, for example, right? So I think there's that part of it. But you can also make the argument, it's, we've had this conversation, you and I in the past, and I've had it with my sister who is a pediatric doctor, is like, why don't they test for vitamin D widely? It's kind of like, you know what's up, right? You pretty much have to supplement. And for fatty liver, it's kind of similar. You have to make certain changes to resolve it. And if the blood work, and again, look, all else equal, if you have high triglycerides, ApoB, and HDL is low, and those all resolve, there's a pretty good chance that your liver fat is decreased. Because those things flow together in terms of like what scientists observe, right? And how they make connections between these metrics.
Right. Yeah, I was even looking back because, I specialize in IBS and gut health, and I do see an overlap of people with fatty liver and IBS, and also with SIBO too. There's a connection with liver health and how that maybe contributes to SIBO. So we had like a bonus masterclass in my IBS program that's on liver health specifically. And I was just looking back at it, and I think I did it in 2023. And at that point, I said 1 in 4 North Americans have fatty liver. And then today you said 1 in 3. So I guess the rates have even gone up since then, or estimations of alcohol.
Estimates vary, right? So some estimates you'll see it's 1 in 4 in North America, 1 in 3 globally. Sometimes you'll see it's 1 in 3 in North America. Certainly it's more prevalent in men than women, and it's being diagnosed younger in men. And also for guys listening, it should also be said, like fatty liver disease is a very strong predictor of low testosterone levels. So that's also interesting. It's also a predictor of less than optimal fertility markers, which is like not overly surprising because, and again, we're going to talk about this, but how you end up with fatty liver is a culmination of less than optimal choices in reality, right? So,
right. Yeah. Are there any tests like blood work that you have your clients have done? I don't think I see like ApoB tested that often in like standard lab work. So would someone have to have a red flag and then be tested for that, or what do you suggest?
You're talking standard blood work. Sometimes they don't even test GGT, which is, again, the reason why I say GGT is the most predictive is there's an equation called the fatty liver index. Okay, the fatty liver index takes into consideration triglycerides, GGT, and then waist circumference, and then I think BMI. Okay. So essentially, the triglycerides is the most likely thing that's going to come up on your standard blood work. And triglycerides are a very strong risk factor for fatty liver. So you could ride the triglyceride wave and lower it, and that would be a pretty strong indication that your liver fat is dropping. But the strongest indication is the FibroScan. The FibroScan really is the only test. Like if you want to get a test now and a test in 3 months, the FibroScan is the only imaging test, in my opinion, that's going to actually be able to quantify a meaningful difference.
Do you have clients push for that, like to get a repeat test in 3 months, or do you find that's difficult just to get their doctors to agree?
To get it at all could be difficult, but I have a a working relationship with a FibroScan clinic in Ontario. So if my clients are compelled to get a FibroScan, I can refer them there, but you have to pay out of pocket. Perhaps some insurance companies will cover it. It's not prohibitively expensive. It's like, at a similar price point to, let's say, a DEXA scan or like a pair of DEXA scans, right? Which you're familiar with that, but that's what you're looking at. So it's not prohibitively expensive, but it's not free.
Yeah, actually, on the topic of DEXA scans, so I just did one recently, and the one that I had access to was able to test for visceral fat. So for those that are listening, don't know what visceral fat is, essentially it's like the fat within our deep internal organs or around like our organs, including like the stomach and also the liver. So I guess, would you say that there's a connection between increased visceral fat, which we know increases risk for metabolic conditions like type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance, heart disease, and fatty liver disease? Like, do they go together, or is visceral fat the same as like the fat that we find on the liver? Is that just visceral fat?
Well, I think certainly you have the potential to store much more visceral fat than liver fat, right? So even if, the amount of fat in your liver to have fatty liver, again, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4 pounds, it's negligible in terms of physical quantity, but it's very meaningful in terms of what it could lead to if it's unresolved, right? So yeah, that's what I would say. So, I mean, certainly, sure, yes, if you have higher visceral fat, it's very likely for various reasons that you're a much greater candidate to have fatty liver. I think that's true, but sometimes it's tough for an individual. Like most people, I mean, let's say the quote unquote average person, they'll never get a DEXA scan. I mean, some people who are really interested in body composition, I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing. It's just a thing, right? So then it comes a point like, if you can get one scan for your liver, I think a FibroScan is more valuable than a DEXA scan. I think that's a fair statement.
Yeah, going back to the question, is like increased visceral fat like correlated with fatty liver disease? Like, do they often go together? If someone has high visceral fat, do they often have fatty liver? Would that be like a risk factor? Or
I mean, so because visceral fat, also measurements of visceral fat generally are like less forthcoming, right? It's not easy to get that in a broad population. So I can say, sure, like very almost inevitably it's the case, but there's no predictive equation that I'm aware of that's commonly used that puts visceral fat into the equation, right? But I think it's a safe assumption to make. I mean, for sure. I mean, almost for sure, the correlation is going to be very strong.
So I guess getting into that then, what causes fatty liver disease and why is it so common now in North America specifically?
Yeah, well, it's not just in North America. It's relatively common globally, I'll say. So that's true. I mean, there's a few different ways to look at it. So simply put, what it is, it's a condition where fat metabolism, which I'll explain what I mean by that, is not what it should be. And what that really means is that fat comes and goes from your liver in various forms. But when you have fatty liver, it's coming more than it's going. That's the easiest way to put it. Now, why that happens is like a culmination of potentially, lack of physical activity, a less than optimal diet that just accumulates over time. And that can manifest in different ways for different people. And one of the ways it can manifest is fatty liver. And fatty liver has about like what they call a heritability is 0.33. So you can think of it as like 33, to oversimplify, it's like 33% genetic. So it's not genetic at all. And the majority of the cause is not genetic. That's what I mean. Right. So that is true. Now, if you want to look for something to blame, like now I'll be very clear. I don't necessarily agree with this camp fully, but people do often blame like fructose intake. And there are a few reasons for that. I mean, the most basic things, you look at the graph, hey, fructose intake goes up and fatty liver disease risk goes up. And of course, that's imperfect science to just draw that conclusion. But fructose is found in pop and sugar sweetened beverages, and they've been sweetened with high fructose corn syrup in recent history. And basically, fructose is metabolized differently than other sugar. It's metabolized largely in the liver. Scientists also believe that fructose might disrupt the gut microbiome, and the liver and the gut are connected, so their fate is intertwined. So there's all these potential justifications, but I think the reality is if you drink 3 cans of pop a day and everything else in your life is perfect, you're not going to get fatty liver disease. That's just the reality. So that is playing a role, but it's just a culmination of that and a lot of other decisions that are just working against you, in my view.
Right. Yeah, it's like anything. We can't just blame one thing that we're doing for what we're experiencing. Like it's usually a combination of things and over time as well. I guess going back to like how fatty liver was renamed, like the idea of it is that there is some metabolic dysfunction or dysregulation. So we know that metabolic health, like there's no, I guess, one specific or like universal definition, but essentially refers to how our body is processing food. And if we have good metabolic health, then we generally have healthy numbers of like triglycerides, cholesterol, waist circumference, blood pressure. So I guess thinking about what contributes to maybe poor metabolic health, would you say that those are risk factors for then developing fatty liver disease? And just in the context of like nutrition, lifestyle, what would you say are some of those like main things?
Yeah. Yeah, no, 100%. Metabolic health, I just use as a fancy term to just refer to like triglycerides, insulin resistance, HDL, other blood fats, right? Blood sugar and so on. So yeah, that's just
which we're
what I use for
seeing
an umbrella
a
term.
lot of people are,
of course,
out of whack. And I see it actually now in like younger and younger, like you said, people in their 30s, sometimes in their 20s with high cholesterol and high blood pressure. So
yeah, so like, I guess, if we work backwards, so what are the foods that are most likely to prevent these issues from happening? Well, an obvious one, if we think of fatty fish, right, which is the only source of EPA and DHA in the diet. And then we have clear evidence that people consume more EPA and DHA have a lower fatty liver risk, that people who have a fatty liver have lower levels of EPA and DHA in their liver cell membranes, which are involved in signaling for fat metabolism. Fatty fish is not widely consumed. And how many people then know that if they don't consume fatty fish, they don't have access to EPA and DHA in their diet, for example? So that's like a glaring and obvious one. Fish is very unique because it's very much like for like. It has vitamin D and omega-3. It's more or less the only food that has it in a meaningful amount. So like fish is an easy one to point out. Now, granted, like no one has to eat fish. They can supplement these things. But the question is, are you doing that or not, right? So that's one thing. And then we look at, well, a big family of foods that is strongly associated with the prevention of fatty liver is flavonoids. That comes up a lot, right? Now, I talk about flavonoids a lot, and it's overly complicated in a sense because it really just means like you have to eat, like you eat fruits and vegetables for the most part. Yeah. I mean, you can boil it down to that, but yeah, it's a fancy term. It's one that I enjoy though, because what it offers like some compartmentalization and some definitive direction. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to like say what the flavonoids are and say a few foods that are high in them. And I would say, based on the evidence I've seen, it's in one breath, I could say all fruits and vegetables are good. But in another breath, I could say there are certain ones that have an above average ability to help with certain concerns, right? Blueberries are very unique. They have a very large amount of anthocyanins. Anthocyanins are not found in a banana, but then a green banana has a large amount of resistant starch, and that's valuable in its own right. So anyway, I digress, but then it becomes a question, okay, well, resistant starch we can get in many other foods, but anthocyanins are like not found in high amounts in that many foods. So then if I can only choose one food a day, what am I going to choose in the context of I can't eat everything all the time, right? So anyway, so yeah, 6 flavonoids, anthocyanins, which is found in the highest amount in blueberries and other blue and purple stuff, like, pomegranate, black beans, grapes in lesser supply. And those flavonones, which are found only in citrus. And again, like there's clear evidence that you eat more flavonones, your fatty liver risk is lower. There's even a study that gave people oranges and found them to be superior to other fruits to like reduce liver fat content. It's a one-off trial. I mean, nonetheless, it's interesting. So berries and citrus are very unique for this reason. And then you have flavones, which are found literally only in parsley, oregano, artichoke, and celery, right? Flavones have a lot of associations. Like there's observational evidence that people with higher flavone intake have less liver fat than people with lower flavone intake. Okay, that's interesting, right? And there's 2 types of flavonols, like one that's found in dark chocolate and green tea, and another one that's found in like capers and leafy greens and broccoli. And then there's just isoflavones in soy, which is like tofu. So the thing is this, is like each of the foods in this group have the potential to be not consumed at all while someone thinks that their diet is very strong.
Right.
Okay. So immediately, those are all points of interest. And also because, again, we find that as their intake is higher, the fatty liver risk is lower, right? So there's very well a unique connection between this family of foods and fatty liver. And then where do we go from there? Well, another food group that people could easily miss is monounsaturated fat, which is just a fancy way to say what's in nuts and avocado, essentially, and olive oil, right? Again, you can have a style of eating that doesn't include these foods, but that looks on paper to be decent. But that's a massive miss because those compounds are not found that abundantly elsewhere. And then, like, not to mention that there's, sorry, I'm kind of like rambling a lot at this point, but like then there's also like magnesium intake is like preventative of like fatty liver. Magnesium is found in nuts, right? Avocado, and many people don't eat enough magnesium. So like some area to look at, right?
I was just going to say about the flavonoids. I think, well, it is something when I talk about like an anti-inflammatory diet with clients, which helps with gut health and even managing IBS. And even if we're doing a low FODMAP elimination, we might be still focusing on anti-inflammatory foods. So I think a good way of thinking about that, I usually suggest, is try to get at least one dark green and one dark purple food each day is like a good place to start. So berries, blueberries are low FODMAP friendly, like raspberries, strawberries, and then dark purple, things like purple cabbage, beets. You can get like purple sauerkraut as another example. So even just like starting there. But as you said, the other flavonoids, those are things with different colors and a lot of plant-based foods, which kind of comes back to like a general theme, I guess, in industrialized diets or North American diets, is a lack of like whole plant-based foods, which then we see people not getting enough of a lot of these different types of nutrients, magnesium, fiber, unsaturated fats, and et cetera. So you can kind of see how it all comes together. And it's interesting too, just with a lot of conditions, because there is like a lot of overlap in terms of like the foods that help too.
That part is something that is definitely the case. And that's definitely what landed me in this area as well, is that reality largely, right? Which I kind of alluded to before. And I'll say, like, I gotta say, because I talk about it all the time, I gotta say legumes, right? I consider legumes as a family of foods to be the most underappreciated family of foods. So lentils, chickpeas, kidney beans, and black beans. I mean, for the challenges the average person faces, like whether economics, whether satiation, whether getting enough magnesium, getting enough fiber, regulating blood sugar levels, over time improving like the profile of the gut microbiome, which is then linked with liver health, it's just an easy win across the board, right? And sure, you have to find the type and amount that's acceptable to you in the context of your patient demographic, of course, but that's doable with the help of a professional. So that's really important. And most people don't eat legumes. Like legumes and nuts are largely underconsumed. That's the reality. And for me, whether it's, you talk about fatty liver, if I see someone on the street at random and I could tell them to eat two foods more, it wouldn't be fruits and vegetables. It would be legumes and nuts, because people eat fruits and vegetables. Whether or not they eat enough is a different story. People don't value nuts and legumes for various reasons, and like they're underconsumed. So you're not tapping into their benefit at all. And their benefit is very unique, in my opinion. So yeah, that would be what I would say for prevention. Obviously, there's all other sorts of stuff like getting adequate protein. And the idea is like these foods displace some of the other stuff, and then whatever fun stuff remains, like all good. You know, you do this stuff and then, you know, you have some fun, you enjoy yourself. That's how I look at it.
Yeah. And I guess I want to talk about like my favorite nutrient that I talk about every day. But what would you have to say about fiber, and how does that play a role?
A great question. And I had this conversation just prior. It was actually with a dietitian, so it was a different context. It wasn't a podcast, but that, you know, she asked me about fiber and do I set fiber goals for my clients? And I actually just, I take it from the other approach where, so if I'm identifying that, like, you know, nuts and legumes are underconsumed and that there's certain fruits and vegetables that have these compounds. So for me, I put forth that goal, knowing that if that goal is accomplished, it's almost inevitable that subsequently the fiber goal will also be accomplished. But I see the value in like setting explicit fiber targets and like tracking that. Fair enough. It just tends like in how I end up operating, I do it a little bit differently. But like certainly, yes, there's no question that, you know, fiber is of the utmost importance and is absolutely abundant in all the foods that we've been talking about. So it goes without saying.
Yeah, exactly. And we know, even like going back to the visceral fat piece, I think like another blood marker, which I guess increases risk for metabolic conditions, is actually, if it's low, is adiponectin. And that's been inversely correlated with visceral fat. And one way that you can increase your adiponectin levels to help protect your metabolic health is both getting enough fiber and also the unsaturated fats. So going back to foods, the nuts, the avocado, etc.
And let's just go back to flavonoids for a second, because there is a very well cited study about 10 years ago, which found that individuals with the highest anthocyanin intake and the highest flavone intake had the highest adiponectin levels, as well as the lowest markers of insulin resistance. You know what I mean? So adiponectin is anti-inflammatory, a very likely positive benefits on insulin resistance as well. And so flavones and anthocyanins, just talked about, are correlated with that. Now, obviously, look, yes, is the fiber part of it? Because the foods that have them also have fiber, of course. Yeah. But do these compounds have unique benefits above and beyond just fiber? They do. They absolutely do.
Yeah. My favorite is dark chocolate. I have it every day.
I love 85%. Yeah. The funny thing is, like, I can eat 85, 90, 100, like whatever is like at the store by my office. But yeah, dark chocolate and cocoa powder. If you don't like dark chocolate, throw cocoa powder and stuff. That's one of the easiest ways to increase your exposure to polyphenols, which we actually didn't say that word yet today, but
yeah, it gets a bad rap too, I think, just because, I mean, chocolate, when it comes down to it, if you're having one that's loaded with sugar and additives, then you're not getting the beneficial properties of cocoa. But like a good quality dark chocolate in the range of like 80 to 90%, like it is it's a real food. It has like protein, there's fiber, there's even like magnesium in it too. So yes, for dark chocolate.
Yeah, no, dark chocolate is a quintessential high flavonoid, high polyphenol food. The problem is, I guess you take the quote unquote average person not working with unlimited quantity, and then you come down to a choice like what's going to be more useful long term, like nuts or dark chocolate. It's tough, right? People have to make tough choices, and I get that. And then maybe they don't like dark chocolate, but if you have room for it in how you view nutrition, it is a strong choice. There's no denying it.
Mm-hmm, definitely. And yeah, going back to the fiber, like I know I see both in clients who have IBS, or I work with like IBD and GERD, and then I get just like recreational athletes just wanting to work more on performance. But it is a pretty common theme that when we start that they're under eating fiber just for like the RDA, which for females is about 25 grams a day, and then males is about 35 grams. And I think it's pretty typical for me to see them getting around 60% of daily intake. Yep. So I love to talk about fiber and like get people's fiber up, but it's not like that difficult to do. I think a lot of people think they're getting enough when they're eating like a salad with some romaine lettuce and a little bit of tomato each day and thinking that's giving them fiber.
Right.
But you said it's more than just like the fruits and vegetables are important, but those other plant-based foods, nuts, seeds, legumes, like those are also really good sources of fiber. And we need that diversity too to help support like a healthy microbiome, which will lead into my next question. But
yep.
Do you want to explain a bit more about the gut-liver axis and how gut health plays a role in liver health too?
Yeah. So try and explain it in simple terms. I mean, the gut and liver are connected through what they call the portal system, or just the portal vein, which is just what it sounds like, vein connecting the two. And blood, after it throws through the digestive tract, it goes to the portal vein to the liver to be essentially purified, because potentially, you know, there could be, you ingest stuff. If it's less than good for you, it has to be cleaned before it goes to the rest of your circulation, essentially, right? So whatever that is, if it's alcohol, if it's something else. So then you get into, you know, the question about the, you know, say the gut microbiome and how that influences the liver, which, I mean, I'm sure you have some high level insights on as well. But if I put it simply, I mean, what scientists observe is that people with a fatty liver tend to have like an overrepresentation of certain bacteria, which let's say are less than helpful, right? And they create less than helpful compounds, like lipopolysaccharides, LPS is whatever we want to call it. Now, under normal conditions or moderate conditions, so your liver, like the first entry point to the liver, you encounter what's called Kupffer cells, which are the detoxifying cells. So those are the things that are responsible for all these like fun functions that we always think about the liver has. Now, your liver can handle moderate amounts of these lipopolysaccharide compounds or moderate amounts of many toxins, right? But when it starts to become an excessive amount, it's not easy to quantify what that means, but when the amount becomes excessive, what that leads to is the Kupffer cells are no longer able to work in the same way. It leads to inflammatory signaling because they're essentially overwhelmed, which then leads to insulin resistance, which then compromises fat metabolism, which then leads to fat storage in the liver. I mean, that's one mechanism, right? And just to be clear, scientists they speculate on the mechanisms that cause fatty liver. There's no one answer. It's this for sure, right? These are what the smartest people currently think could be causing it. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the factors, which is why you'll see, I mean, we know that probiotics are not solve all, but for example, why you see good evidence that resistant starch supplementation could help with fatty liver. Probiotic helps with some markers of fatty liver, which is why, you know, compounds like polyphenols, which have some influence on the microbiome. When you have a high polyphenol Mediterranean diet, it's more effective at reducing liver fat than a low polyphenol Mediterranean diet, right? And the likely explanation is the influence on the gut microbiome, just to put it relatively simply.
Yeah, it's a pretty strong connection there. And yeah, I think it's roughly like 70% of the blood flowing through the portal vein is from
75%, I think it is. Yeah, you're right.
Tract. So yeah, going back to what I said about seeing connection with IBS and fatty liver, like we know now in IBS, there is like a level of dysbiosis in the gut microbiome where something in the microbiome profile has gone off track and maybe not as many of the good bacteria, more of the bad or the pathogenic, and just like an overall reduced diversity and resilience of the microbiome profile. And that because then we get maybe like a low-grade inflammatory state within the intestine, and then there's production of, like you said, those endotoxins and LPS. Then that contributes to sort of the quality, I guess, of the blood that the liver's getting. And if it has to work even harder because it's getting kind of this blood that's got more toxins in it, then you can see how kind of the liver can become a little bit tired or maybe a bit overworked and not able to do its job like as effectively. Would you say that's kind of a
Yeah, I think basically, I read an article, and the article I think was titled like Kupffer cells from friend to foe in fatty liver. And it's basically because the Kupffer cells, the detoxifying cells, are highly functional up until a tipping point, and then they go from friend to foe. Like if there's too many bad things they have to deal with, it's kind of like F this, like I don't want to do this anymore. I'm like leaving the work site. You know what I mean? Kind of thing. Obviously, it's not, I'm just giving a fun example, but yeah, that's essentially what happens. These cells that otherwise are so helpful become unhelpful when the context is wrong. And just like a fun fact, just to tie this in, because I mentioned this earlier, right? So you talk about omega-3s. Now, in severe fatty liver disease, there's a specific family of bacteria that they've identified are overrepresented, a specific, genus, whatever you want to call it, the broader grouping, okay? And what I've seen in evidence is that omega-3 supplementation actually, in at least one study, has lowered that family of bacteria. Now, that doesn't explain the whole of omega-3's benefits, but certainly it's very fascinating, right? These kind of connections that you can make, and just speaks to the massive interconnectedness of the body more than anything else. But it's fascinating. It's fascinating observations.
Yeah, that's a good point too. It's good to remember like what's happening in the liver is not just like isolated to the liver. We have to look at the whole body and what else is going on, and going back to your diet as a whole, not just one thing that you're doing, but what you're doing overall on a regular basis, and then lifestyle as well. There's a good point. Yeah, I guess just sort of take away, like, what would you say are the key, I know you mentioned it before, but sort of key ways we can use nutrition to improve liver health, and then we'll get into lifestyle a little more.
I'll give like a robust answer, so why not? So there's a few ways to look at it, right? So first of all, there are theoretically many different ways that one could like reverse fatty liver disease using nutrition. But if you want to label it under an umbrella, the simplest way I would put it is a high polyphenol Mediterranean diet. And what does that mean? Well, the aspects of like a Mediterranean diet, quote unquote, that people aren't accounting for mostly are fish, nuts, and legumes. So probably you got to eat more of those or account for what you're missing from those. Okay. And then the whole high polyphenol part is simply understanding. Now, I mean, I'm jumping around. Now, you're just saying all flavonoids are polyphenols, but not, sorry. Yeah, all flavonoids are polyphenols, but all polyphenols are flavonoids. So that's also true for that's worth. So high polyphenol Mediterranean diet means, okay, understanding like what foods are very high in polyphenols, find out what ones you like, and then make them represent more of your diet, right? You do those two things together, that would be a simplified version of the formula for success. Now, there's low-hanging fruit that you can use in your favor. You can use cocoa powder to greatly increase your polyphenol exposure. You can use capers to greatly increase your polyphenol exposure. You can use dried parsley to greatly increase your exposure to certain flavonoids. You know what I mean? You can do little things like that, which are incidental, which you don't need to do them, but you'll be in a better, more advantaged position if you do, because the compounds they give you access to are pretty confident are beneficial. So that's what I would say.
Okay. I'm happy to hear about the capers. I think my mom's listening to this. She will as well. So we use them a lot.
Capers are extremely unique foods.
You think of them as just like little bursts of flavor. I never actually realized that they were so high.
Oh yeah, capers are a single high source of quercetin, and then quercetin has implications for like the health of the mitochondria, which helps with fat metabolism. It's all overly technical stuff, but like capers are a very unique food. If you're someone out there who maybe you cannot make a really strong dietary change, and so you have to get as many little wins as possible, that's the kind of little win that you want to get, in my opinion.
And overall, like diet profile, you mentioned the Mediterranean diet, which we always say is more of like an eating pattern more so than like specific foods. Like you said, just find foods within those, I guess, the groups of the like profile of the Mediterranean diet that work for you, and that may look different in different cultures, or what fruits, vegetables,
100%
you have access to. Do you want to give like maybe some more examples of?
Yeah. Well, the real answer is a curated Mediterranean diet, which basically means like adapted for the individual, but it's obviously hard to really fully flesh that out in this format. And what I mean by that is like, it's not Mediterranean diet without further attentiveness, because for example, the Mediterranean diet will tell you maybe to limit yogurt like that. And that's one thing necessarily that is actually maybe not as functional for fatty liver. Yogurt has numerous benefits, not least of which it's a facilitator for things like nuts and seeds and fruit, which make it very easy to have like a high protein meal with little effort and get those foods. So it's not the Mediterranean diet blindly, it's like a curated approach. But to get that curated approach, ideally you're working with a professional to help bring it to life. And equally, the Mediterranean diet tells you not to eat that much beef and chicken, but realistically, a lot of people don't like fish. A lot of people need to get enough protein. You may need to eat a bunch of beef and chicken. You can do that and do everything else and be in a good position. So the Mediterranean diet per se has limitations, but just as a basic framework, it's the closest thing that we have, I think, to put a label on it. Other examples such as like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, diversity in protein intake, which is a fancy way to say eat more fish, you know?
And soy proteins.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, soy has unique benefits on liver health as well. Soy helps with fat metabolism. It does something to a specific protein. I think it's the SREBP protein. Like, we've got to look it up. I looked at too many studies. Can't always remember the exact details, but soy has unique benefits for liver health. So it has flavonoids as well, right? So if you like it, work it in the rotation.
Yeah. Even for my clients, low FODMAP diet, firm tofu, tempeh,
Yeah.
or low
High polyphenol.
FODMAP.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And even like the philosophy of the Mediterranean diet, it's not just about those specific foods, but the idea too is also like cooking from scratch, trying to get whole foods, like using or local foods as well. Which, going back to it, we know that if we're eating more real foods in our diet, actually eating a whole apple versus an apple chip or apple muffin or whatever, we'll get a lot more nutrients. We get more of the fiber intact, like the vitamins and minerals. So even just using that as a guide too, to try to have a mix of, real foods in our diet, which again is less common now. Just that way we have access to so many foods that are inherently like more processed or ultra processed too.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. I'm jumping ahead already to like the optimal solution, but you're right. There's a path in between. And a lot of people, it's true that different people need different amounts of guidance and curation in the approach. So that's very fair.
Yeah. I guess, what do you think about fermented foods? Like, I like to recommend them because I know that we've seen that they can improve microbiome diversity. They can also lower markers of inflammation. Is that something you recommend for fatty liver?
Yeah. So first of all, there's good evidence that like fermented food, dairy consumption specifically, lowers fatty liver risk. It can improve markers of fatty liver disease. I mean, with some other contextual factors involved. But yeah, no, for those who like fermented foods, yeah, it's going to be a net benefit, right? To your point, to the gut microbiome. And if it's a net benefit to the gut microbiome, it's going to be very likely a net benefit to your liver health. But it's one of those things. Sometimes it's tough to, and I talk about them, but it's tough to prioritize them, right? It's not the most important thing. There are other bigger priorities, but there's no question. It's like green tea or coffee. You can drink green tea and coffee. It will improve. Like, there's good studies that coffee has like been well observed to reduce the risk of advancing fatty liver disease. So it's great to know that. But if I have a choice between someone drinking 3 cups of coffee or eating nuts and beans, like, I know which one I'm going to choose is more important, right, for their long-term success. So, but no, fermented foods absolutely have a role to play. And if anyone likes them, I think it's a net benefit. So absolutely agree with that.
Yeah. Which are, just to describe them or explain what they are. So they're foods that are preserved by microbial fermentation. So you actually get like different natural yeasts and bacteria preserving foods. And it's things like sauerkraut, kimchi, kefir, which is fermented milk, probiotic yogurts, true sourdough bread, tempeh.
I saw your post on that. That was, I learned something from that. So
yeah, I love to talk about sauerkraut.
Yeah.
And kombucha too. Like, you can get a real raw kombucha. Some of them are a bit more processed, but if you get like a real raw one, it still has some live microbes intact too. Yeah, theme you mentioned as well. I think just like foods for liver health, coffee, fruit, and dark chocolate. I feel like those are foods that are often like demonized, or people feel like they shouldn't be eating them. But in the
context, what isn't demonized, right? That's the reality of it. Like, beans are demonized, fish, it's unfortunate, right? It's tough. It's a tough one. I think the only thing I would say to that is it's so tough because it's all different arguments, it's different foods, but someone who's going out of their way to tell you that something's the worst, like, they, I think it's fair to say they probably don't have your best interest in mind. They're just leveraging the fact that fear is a better way to retain people's attention, right? So be wary of people who focus on saying this is bad, that's bad. I mean, do they really care about your outcomes, or do they just care about your attention, right?
Very true. Yes. I guess even in coffee, I think people, like, I know I have clients that are always surprised to hear that it actually is okay for them. Like, some people are just genetically sensitive to caffeine and they can get a lot of anxiety, but coffee, it actually is a good source of antioxidants. Like you said, it can help reduce liver fat. I've even seen that it's good for the microbiome. So in like a healthy amount, 2 to 3 cups a day, have it earlier so it doesn't impact your sleep. Like, it actually can be part of a fatty liver and a gut healthy diet as well.
Yeah, it's important for people who like coffee to feel okay about drinking. Of course, like, I mean, look, yeah, you start having, a venti at 8 p.m. It's going to probably cause you issues. Fair enough. Yeah. And also, if someone like doesn't love coffee or has a negative effect on them, just to say, right, as your diet quality goes up, the relevance of coffee goes down. You know what I mean? If you're knocking it out of the park, coffee's not going to give you much additional benefit because you're already getting exposure to polyphenols. Like, you're good, you're getting antioxidants, right? But the more, again, like I said earlier, the more that you're not able, and not everyone is, for lifestyle, for life, busyness, economics, whatever, the less you're able to execute all things at a high level, the more those little details start to matter.
Right. That's true too. And it's like everything too. Like, you have to look at the bigger picture. Same with chocolate, like with coffee, you know, timing, what are you adding to it? Like, all that's going to influence its benefit. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cocoa powder and coffee, by the way, is a smart way to, I had my clients been telling me they've been doing that as a vehicle to get cocoa powder. So it could be a fun idea for anyone listening to get more polyphenols.
I like just like plain dark chocolate, but and I like my
that's fine. I'm not saying for you. Yeah, you know,
No,
we know,
I
well,
know.
we're set in our ways. You know, we're beyond saving, but I'm talking about for someone who still has hope.
True. That's why too, I'm sure, yeah, you do this with your clients as well, but it's not like you throw everything or change everything about your diet like in a day. Like,
of course,
with a dietitian, you can kind of see what's priority, like you said, low hanging fruit, and then build on those strategies over time. And it may take, you know, a few months to get things in a better place, but it's okay to work on it over time. Like, you don't feel like you have to do it all at once, and it could be helpful to have someone guiding you to know what's the actual research saying, what's important, and then what should you tweak about your current routine, and how can you build on that over time.
Yep.
Anything around, like, I guess, lifestyle behavior, strength training, zone 2, sleep that you would
I mean,
plunges.
Yeah, that's funny. I'm gonna have to look into the cold plunge for liver health. I can't imagine there's gonna be too much there, although nothing wrong with that. I mean, I don't mind that stuff myself, but I mean, look, physical activity, right? There's different thresholds, right? You're doing no physical activity. If you do 150 minutes of walking a week, so 5 30-minute walks, that puts you in a much better position. You already walk. Okay, well, there's differential benefits to cardiovascular training versus resistance training. Can you do one or both? I've even seen studies that HIIT workouts specifically increase the functionality of the Kupffer cells. And there's one specific study. HIIT workouts, which is just a fancy way to say you do a moderate intensity, you really high intensity, then you do moderate intensity. It's not enjoyable, but there's unique benefits associated with that potentially for liver health and for other aspects of, you certainly spend more energy in a shorter time. But look, physical activity, I guess the best advice depends where it's at. But yeah, generally speaking, if you can be involved in cardiovascular and resistance training for 150 minutes a week, it's going to put you in a way better position to reverse fatty liver disease. There's no question.
And even go on. Do you have more to say?
No, I was going to say beyond that, obviously alcohol intake, you got to be mindful of that, right? I mean, if the liver is not working as well, potentially you want to moderate alcohol to the best of your ability if someone is drinking. And I mean, sleep is associated with insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is universal in fatty liver. So if you sleep less than 6 or 7 hours, if you can sleep an extra 45 minutes, it'll likely give you positive benefits on insulin resistance, like a magic pill, right? If you can sleep 45 minutes more. So absolutely all that stuff counts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even from the exercise perspective, yeah, it's true. If you're not doing any activity, you don't have to go out and strength train 5 days a week and do 4 HIIT workouts, but they do help. Like, I know in the context of strength training, like building muscle that improves your insulin resistance and helps support metabolic health. And then, I have heard that too about like high intensity interval training. Like, more is not better, but in the realm of like 1 to 3 workouts a week with adequate recovery between, like, those definitely can help improve insulin sensitivity too, which then may help with fatty liver because of the metabolic condition.
Yeah, and I've seen a study I've seen that is referring to what the unique benefits of HIIT. I mean, what it found is that 12 minutes of a HIIT workout was giving similar benefits to 40 minutes of let's say steady state cardio. So, which is not overly surprising because you're suffering in a sense. I don't mean that in a negative way. It's challenging, right? To work near your VO2 max is going to be challenging for anyone. That's the nature of it. So it's not going to be pleasant. But there's benefits to that, and you don't need to do it for as long, for example. And if time is a very important consideration, cool. But equally, you got to be properly warmed up and prepared for that stuff. That's not a joke. Start running at 90, 85%, 90%. Anyway, that's a story for a trainer to help with, though, I guess.
Well, no, that's true about high intensity workouts, though, is like that they should be short, because if they're too long, then you're not able to actually work at your high intensity zone. You're probably more in the moderate zone. So they're, anywhere between maybe 10 to 25, 30 minutes, like generally don't get longer than that. And they hurt if you're working really hard, but they can be time management too. So maybe if someone doesn't have, an hour to do zone 2 training, trying to do two 15-minute HIIT workouts per week, maybe that can, or 12 minutes, like you said on the study. Too. So lots of strategies, as we talked about, like a lot of different things to think about when it comes to fatty liver. Yeah. Oh, I did have one more question. For people listening, some people might be thinking about the idea of like a detox or a cleanse. We think about that when we think about liver health. What would you say to someone who's wondering if maybe they should be doing a quarterly or an annually cleanse?
Yeah, if we work backwards, right? If I'm saying that the number one threat to your liver health is fat accumulation occurs over months and years. So the idea that something you're going to do in a moment, that is going to have a meaningful influence on that, for me, just seems highly unlikely. Hey, if the detox means you're going to have some smoothie and you don't ever eat fruit, okay, so that one instance, it's going to be beneficial, but it's not going to give you a long-term improvement. There's no fancy trick. I mean, if fat has accumulated in your liver, it's a result of a combination of choices over an extended period. You can only rectify it via a combination of choices over an extended period. That's it, right?
Like anything, there's no magic pill.
Yeah.
And yeah, like we said too, the liver is the body's master detoxifier. That's what it does. It's pretty good at detoxifying. And I think if we're on a regular basis supporting it to do its job through, like we said, those different nutrition components, fiber, flavonoids, the other things we mentioned, then it's going to be able to work well on a proper basis, that we don't need to try to fix it periodically with a detox or cleanse. I think people get into the mentality that they can do whatever they want and eat off a fatty liver healthy diet because they're maybe doing a cleanse every 3 months or something. So
that would be greatly concerning if anyone was abiding by that. And just as an example, the detoxification is abundant in the diet. And I'll just give you one more example. So milk thistle is traditionally a very popular supplement. It's not going to change. It's not necessary. It might lower liver enzymes. It might not. It's certainly not enough to reverse fatty liver disease. But milk thistle, the active ingredient is called silymarin. Now, whether or not I pronounce that correctly, I don't know, but that's more or less how to pronounce it. Now, silymarin is a compound called a lignin, and flax seeds contain a large amount of lignins. So, the diet, when you pursue a diverse, varied diet, understand the food groups that are more important, you're accessing more beneficial compounds than you can comprehend. And that's just one example. And not to say that the lignins in flaxseed are the same as the lignins in this family, but they're in the same family. So they do have similar benefits, if not the exact same mechanism of action, right? So just something fun to keep in mind. I think ground flaxseed would be also a fatty liver superfood, in my opinion. And also, let's be honest, superfood for just about everything, most likely, given its efficiency of use and all that.
Exactly. Cool. Yeah. Any other things to add or final thoughts?
Just eat slowly and mindfully. So advice I'm sure that you would probably appreciate. It's a low-hanging fruit in one sense, but it's so universally a problem. Like how many clients just eat distracted, rush their meals, don't chew thoroughly. There's consequences for that. And for insulin resistance, for post-meal satiation, for digestive health. So no matter what else, that's something that you can do, right? So I throw that out there. And also, for some people, if they need extra help with satiation, with blood sugar regulation, they can eat the protein and vegetables first, then a meal, and then the starch last. And that's for someone who maybe just wants to check every box, and they're in a position where they're of that mindset and they don't mind doing that. I don't think you have to do that, but there's some science in that area. So just some random facts that I think are universally applicable to a lot of people. Just throw that out there.
Yeah. I was going to say actually just about the natural detoxification, but urinating and having bowel movements are a way that we naturally detoxify.
Right.
Just ways that we can support that, being efficient, drinking enough water, having enough fiber, making sure we're going every day. And if you are constipated or having issues, getting help with that too, because that's another way our body helps remove toxins and helps the liver too.
100%. Yeah, anyone can do it. You want to do a detox, you want to make a smoothie of some kind, it's not likely going to set you back, but just, you can't delude yourself into thinking that's enough. It's, that's how you end up. You do that and nothing else. That's how you end up with more advanced stage of this condition. So you have to be very mindful. I hope that there's a lot of people who are doing that, but, I guess it's concerning. You don't know, right? The behaviors of big groups of people, because we don't have access to everyone and it's hard to quantify that. So it's a fair point.
Yeah. All right. Just to end it off, I guess, do you want to share about how people can get in touch with you And do you offer any free resources, or do you want to share a little bit about your Fatty Liver Fighters course as well?
Yeah. Well, my TikTok and my Instagram is as well as Andy ARD are, I think, as good as it gets for free resources. I mean, I think there's a lot of thank you. Appreciate it. I mean, obviously I just finished saying I learned something from your sourdough post. So likewise, but yeah, I mean, I think in terms of free resources, that's it. And then I do have an online course where actually there's been some dietitians, nutrition students joining, which is great. And then you have the option to pair that with coaching with me, depending on where someone's at. So, but these are all stuff you can follow the path down my Instagram and my TikTok. And if you really want to work with me, it won't be hard to get in touch.
Cool. Yeah, I'll include links to all those below in the notes. Well, yeah. Thanks so much, Andy. This is a great talk today. If anyone has any questions, you can post them below, and then we'll share the contact too, so you can get in touch.